Welcome back. You're watching HFO-TV.
Let's give a warm welcome to Scott Arena.
I entitled my presentation today, The Winds of Change, because a lot's been happening in our local market. I stand before you today as a member of a rapidly diminishing faction of our Portland population. I'm someone who was actually born here and raised here. And from what I gather from my conversations with people on the street and neighbors down the block, I'm becoming an endangered species. At this point in time, anyone who's called our city home for more than 5 years realizes they're part of a new and ever-changing Portland. We've become more crowded, slower to get from point A to point B, more facial hair, more flannel, more brew pubs, and perhaps even a bit more weird, but in a good way, of course. My daughter thought I said weed, and I said, well, that's probably part of the issue, too. But a lot of dirt has been turning, and our city horizon looks much different than even just a few years ago. According to the latest Crane Index, Ryder, Levitt, and Bucknell, at the start of this year, the end of last year, 32 construction cranes towered above the Portland horizon. Signs of healthy trends of construction and development in our city are visible in whichever direction one looks. We've been riding a wave of healthy economic conditions for a while now. Population growth continues, and substantial job growth is still evident. Definite change. Same photographic vantage point over 100 years looks a lot different now, especially from when I was a kid. I want to take a brief look at the economy. I don't want to step on the toes of the much more qualified panelists up here, but I think it sets the backdrop for the multifamily housing market as well. According to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, Portland unemployment bottomed out at 3% last May, crept back up to 3.8% by year end, and we currently sit at about 3.6%. Job growth in Portland in 2017 was up 2.6%, with more than 27,000 jobs added. That was January through October alone. We continue to see record lows in unemployment, and household income growth remains strong. According to United Van Lines, for 5 years straight, Portland has had the highest percentage of inbound moves, with approximately 50% of those driven by jobs and 24% just wanting to be near family. Our city finds itself in one of the healthiest economies and development cycles seen in several years, and we continue to see job expansion in construction, education and health, and professional services, government jobs, and hospitality. This is very evident to me. New hotels dot corners of downtown blocks, and new eateries pop up faster than we can Google them. TripAdvisor currently provides reviews on more than 3,600 Portland restaurants. Over 100 new restaurants opened in 2017 alone. Now more than ever, the term foodie capital applies to our humble little Portlandia. A lot of change in the cityscape since I was growing up. Certainly more restaurants to select from when this guy in the center photo here took his prom date in 1983. Does anybody remember Atwater's? How about Club Plaza? Scoochie's? I'm feeling old up here. Help me out, people. Izod shirts, Varney sunglasses. I'm pretty sure under that tux I was wearing a Depeche Mode t-shirt. My girlfriend was pretty in pink. That tux was not. Lots of change for sure, lots for the better too. Portland continues to garner interest from institutional investors seeking relatively safe and still affordable places to park investment dollars. For some time now, no longer a hidden gem, our city's shine is attracting dollars both domestic and foreign. To quote a well-known baseball movie and one of my favorites from long ago, if you build it, they will come. Well, it looks like we've done a lot of building, and they're definitely arriving, and they're staying. And we'll need to build more. Projections indicate 90,000 new households for the Portland region over the next 5 years. You think traffic's bad now? It might get a little worse. So what's been happening in our current apartment housing market? The surge of new multifamily development has resulted in a more balanced market environment, and we are seeing some significant changes as supply finally tips towards demand. According to our latest apartment report data, the Portland metro area can anticipate additional units of up to 8,000 by year end this year. The number pales in comparison to an additional 40,000 in the pipeline for proposed projects. Our local apartment market has remained strong for the last few years with a significant amount of construction and new product hitting the market. This was quite evident in December when, according to the Colliers International Q4 report, more than 9,500 units were under construction inside Portland city limits alone, with thousands of additional still in the permitting pipeline. Whether or not these projections are met will depend on some key factors. Many will never make it to construction due to escalating construction costs and overall softening of market conditions. Possible proposed rental regulation measures are also legitimate concerns. According to the latest Barrie apartment report, 2017 had the busiest year ever for Portland apartment construction, rivaled only by a short period way back in the 1970s. The city witnessed a wave of developers rushing to beat implementation of inclusionary zoning, requiring a certain number of units to be designated as affordable housing with a development and limiting rent levels. Last year saw permits issued for 10,319 new apartment units across the four-county metro area. This is 41% more than issued in 2016. Over 60% of the new unit permits were issued in Multnomah County. The City of Portland reports a 1 to 2 year supply of pre-IZ units in the pipeline. Considering the quantity of these units remaining, permits for 12,000 and 18,000 units are expected for 2018 and 2019. Activity through February of this year reflects 1,550 permits issued for 9,300 annualized. The majority of these will be issued for projects with pre-IZ entitlements. It's interesting to note that since implementing IZ in Portland in February of last year, applications for the new projects has drastically decreased. A little over a year since enactment, and applications have been submitted for only approximately 1,000 new apartment units in buildings with more than 20 units. This begs a question. Once this inventory of pre-IZ projects has been brought to the market, will there be a new batch of IZ-compliant projects to refill the hopper? That answer is uncertain. However, in recent years, as supply outpaces demand, a slowdown in permits activity can help with absorption of those newly completed units. Impact costs cannot be overlooked as a genuine concern to builders. Labor costs are rising. Some projects just do not pencil out. One developer noted in the current Barrie report stated that for the period between 2014 and 18, labor and materials increased from $156 to $220 per square foot. The single-family market slowed down in 2017, but the forecasts point to increased housing starts in coming years. As the core renter demographic ages, a transition to home ownership is likely to occur. Interesting to note that a 1% increase in home ownership translates to 9,000 less renters in the pool. Yes, our market conditions are changing. We're seeing the effects of significant supply brought to market in response to high demand for Portland and its abundance of livability factors. Perhaps the most prominent concern to many, particularly our local city officials, is a lack of affordable housing. Tom Potowski, an economics professor at PSU, remarked last month in a Portland Business Journal article, there's a pent-up demand for affordable housing. Because of the high cost of living, there's an even greater demand for multifamily housing. But a change in the market is quite evident, as prospective residents who can afford higher rates in new properties are no longer competing with those prospects seeking older and less amenity-filled B and C class apartments. Creating less competition for lower-priced product, we will see availability of affordable inventory increase. Despite the recent boom, winds of change are in the air. Many of us in this room, as owners and managers of multifamily buildings, are being forced to reevaluate and recreate our marketing strategies. The market frenzy is cooling and the apartment market is softening. New product inventory is not renting as quickly as before. Owners and property managers are now testing the waters on that opposite side of the coin. What are we seeing in the vacancy numbers? Overall vacancy is increasing. The latest report shows an increase of 48 basis points over the fall report number as we stand at near a 5% overall vacancy. Just 3 of the 6 submarkets in the report showed vacancy under 4%. 6 of the submarkets are showing vacancy above 5%. As we see from the report data, the lowest vacancies are being felt in outer areas of Multnomah County. Highest vacancies remain inside the downtown core and the inner urban submarkets. Leading the pack in highest available inventory is right in downtown Portland at 7%. The urban setting is convenient, trendy, and attractive, but empty units are more prevalent these days. Clackamas and Northwest follow with vacancy of over 6%. Lowest vacancy rates were reported in the areas of North Portland, St. John's area, Troutdale, and outer Northeast. Which floor plans are showing the lowest vacancies? We're seeing that in the two-bedroom townhomes at 3.9% average vacancy. Highest vacancies are seen with studio units at 5.8, just under 6%. It's important to note when you're reading through the report that the report figures do not take into account any projects in the lease-up phase that are not yet stabilized. So there's a lot of new product out there not being reported. Our report states a number of sources do indicate slower than anticipated absorption with properties in this category. Competition in close-in neighborhoods is driving increasingly aggressive concessions. We're seeing this at IPM as well, and I'm hearing it from other competing companies. We're seeing aggressive concessions, the likes of which we've not seen in a long while. Leasing incentives, all but non-existent for the last few years, are becoming more prevalent and necessary to occupy inventory. Digital advertising that I've seen lately from many new properties currently in lease-up are enticing prospects with such heavy discounts as up to 6 weeks free rent, 3 months of free parking, Uber and Lyft credits, and Visa cards valued at several hundreds of dollars. So much for the move-ins gifts that I gave in the 90s, with a plunger and a toilet roll and a pasta. Doesn't work anymore. It's interesting that such tactics are also penetrating and trickling down to the B and C markets and the stabilized properties as well. Turnover rents are remaining flat year over year, as we see in the report. For the first time in 8 years, total average rents for the Portland market have taken a turn downward. Of 20 geographic areas surveyed, 7 showed declining rent levels. Remaining areas remained static or showed a slight uptick. Where are we seeing the highest rents? Lake Oswego, 8%. Lowest is in Aloha and Wilsonville with actually 3% reductions. Has overall rent growth peaked for the Portland metro area? From the numbers, it appears so. If your 2018 budgeting included rent growth of about 4 to 5%, you might come up a bit short this year. Let's take a look at rental rates. As the graph illustrates, total average rent per square foot for all areas surveyed is at about $1.56. We're seeing the highest rates in the downtown core at $2.43, followed by Northwest Portland at $2.07. Our lowest rates are being seen in West Vancouver and Northeast Portland, both averaging about $1.26 per square foot. The report reflects more than 1 out of 10 properties now offering rent incentives. That's nearly twice the number cited in last fall's report. Incentives and discounts are not just limited to new lease-ups. As previously said, we are seeing a trickle-down effect through the region into the stabilized and B and C properties. If you're a property manager in the metro area, you're typically seated on a vacant unit for an average of about 35 days now. Things are even slower out in Clackamas with an average 3-month for a vacant to lease. East Vancouver and Aloha are at about 2 months. Fastest moving inventory is seen in outer southeast and the northeast regions, averaging 17 days, where rents are also some of the lowest in the region. I wanted to touch on operational expense. We are seeing that average operating cost per unit has risen 6% year over year as rent growth is losing a bit of steam. This is also placing downward pressure on net operating incomes. Where will rents go? The latest Barry report predicts vacancies approaching 5.5% by year-end 2018. Predictions include higher vacancies in areas of above-average construction and higher-end rent levels. Eventually, but slowly, pricing will be tempered to more reasonable rates by increased periods of vacancy. That said, concessions will continue until full occupancy is achieved at those new projects. This will and is spreading into that sector of seasoned units, particularly those competing with the lower end of the new product supply. I agree with the Barry report prediction that apartment income will be up 1 to 4%, and that by the end of 2018, the market will be more in balance across the metro area. Some submarkets will see a shift in power to the renter's side, especially at that higher end. To sum up, Portland's still attractive, a great place to live. Investors want to be here. Starting to see the temperatures cool a little bit. Our employment is still very robust. Most economists agree Portland is at full employment. Our supply is catching demand, but more units are needed. Our city continues to grow, but more people keep moving here. Vacancies are rising. There's a lot more product to select from out there, and we're starting to see that trickle down into the seasoned units as well. Rents are lowering, which means affordability is increasing. We're seeing concessions on the rise and some discounting in place. One thing off the grid I do want to mention, I think it's important as property managers and owners that we pay attention to local and state policy making. It's extremely important we stay focused on measures and means that help, not hinder, the ability of our industry owners and management companies to provide safe and comfortable housing for all. I want to go back in time for a minute in my closing statement here. I'm going to jump in that DeLorean, and I want to reflect for just a minute and share a bit of personal insight on change that I've seen in our industry. As Mark said, I entered this industry over 20 years ago. It's actually going to be 27 years this year. I began my career in property management way back in 1991 with a local Portland-based firm. I took on a role as a site manager of a new development of 88 units under lease-up in a small but growing community called Gresham. These were very simple times by comparison to today. Aside from an entry sign in the driveway and A-boards on the street, attracting renters included two primary forms of print advertising. A small rental booklet available at grocery store lobbies called For Rent. The other, a rental ad in the Oregonian newspaper in a black and white print section known as classifieds. It's an archaic form of news and information dissemination. This is printed on very thin print paper. People purchased daily issues or they had them delivered to their homes. Kids rode bikes and threw them at their porches when kids could do that. Now they'd be looking at devices and wouldn't be able to do that anymore. No email, no cell phones, no texting, no Facebook, no Instagram. I put Snapchat, but my 13-year-old daughter said, no, they won't know that, Dad. No emojis, no likes, no Yelp, no Glassdoor. If a resident wasn't happy, he or she called your supervisor or maybe told a few neighbors face-to-face, or you face-to-face. If I had a legal issue, I contacted a young and ambitious Portland real estate attorney named Andy, a guy with wild hair who enjoyed martial arts and telling good jokes once in a while. Most bad. I'm kidding, Andy. Happy birthday. Andy and I shared a birthday this last night. Thank you. I'm still younger. Yeah, thank you. You're wiser. Social media was called People Magazine. Twitter was something your building owner did when cash flow projections were not being met. My office was the second bedroom of the model apartment. I had a computer monitor the size of a small block V6 engine with integrated keyboard. It had an operating system called DOS. Does anybody remember the flashing cursor? I do. Backups were done to something called a floppy disk. If away from the leasing office, I had a telephone message machine attached to a push-button phone that recorded calls on something called audio tape. My daily and weekly property management reports were loudly printed off folded reams of perforated paper and delivered in person to the corporate office 16 miles away. If I got lost, I checked with a guidebook named Thomas. Anybody? Anybody? Some things change, some things stay pretty much the same. Lots have changed for certain. The graphs, the data, the numbers are extremely important and provide the metrics of measurement we need in order to evaluate and predict performance. But one thing always stays the same. In property management, we're in the business of housing people. And people need and want decent, well-cared-for housing. We must never lose sight of this. It's easy enough in theory. Provide a well-made product or consistent good service and customers will follow. It's just that simple and just that difficult. There is no shelter against the winds of change, but we ultimately have control over how we react to any change. Our industry is changing at an incredibly fast pace. Embrace new technology, but do not lose sight of the value of relationship building. If you're standing still, you're running backwards. Keep moving forward, identify and stay true to your core values. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this morning. Thank you to my colleagues who contributed to the Spring Apartment Report and for their assistance, and all who are speaking today. It's an honor to be in such esteemed company. Best wishes to us all for a successful 2018.
Our entire office specializes in multifamily real estate, making HFO the largest multifamily brokerage in the Pacific Northwest. Your success is our passion. Build your legacy with HFO. Call 503-241-5541 or visit our website at hfore.com for more information.